Poison Study by Maria V. Snyder. Audiobook by Cinna. Chapter 32. The Final Chapter. I gasped, remembering. Janco! Grabbing Valek's arm, I dragged him with me, explaining between huffs of breath. Still wearing Brazil's colors, although torn and blood-stained, we roused the medic, who, with peevish annoyance, fussed about protocol and proper authority until Valek drew his knife. My stomach heaved when we entered Rayad's wing. The hallway leading to the captive's room was gruesome. Soldiers littered the floor. Pieces of arms and legs were scattered about, as if someone had hacked their way through them. The walls were splattered with blood, and pools of scarlet dotted the floor. The medic wanted to stop at the first man, but Valek yanked him to his feet. Stepping carefully around the bodies, we reached the doorway. Just inside, I saw Janco lying on his side with his head in Irys' lap. He was unconscious, which was a good thing, since a sword had skewered his stomach, the bloody tip poking from his back. Irys' gore-splashed face held a grim expression. A crimson-coated axe, the weapon responsible for the carnage in the hallway, rested next to him. Irys sat cross-legged, in the center of the circle of emaciated people. Her brow glistened with sweat. Her expression was distant. The chained women and men viewed the scene with dispassionate eyes. The trip to the infirmary was a chaotic nightmare. Everything blurred together like a whirlwind until I found myself lying in a bed next to Janco, holding his hand. The medic did his best, but if the sword had pierced any vital organs, or if there was internal bleeding, Janco wouldn't survive. Twice during the night, Ari and I despaired that we would lose him. My own wound had been cleaned and sealed with Rand's glue, but I hardly noticed or cared about the throbbing pain. I aimed all my energy and strength toward Janco, willing him to live. Late the next day, I woke from a light doze.
"Sleeping on the job,"
Janco whispered, with a weak smile on his ashen face. I breathed a sigh of relief. Surely, if he was strong enough to insult me, then he was on his way to recovery. Unfortunately, Irys couldn't say the same about the commander. 4 days after Malkin's death, he still hadn't regained his spirit. His advisors had rebounded from their brief ensorcelment, and they had commandeered Brazil's manor while waiting for the commander to return. They assumed temporary control of the military district. Messengers were sent north to General Tesso of MD4 and west to General Hazel of MD6, requesting their immediate presence. The generals would have the authority to determine what the next step would be in case the commander failed to revive. Just as confusing was the fact that none of Brazil, Malkin, and Rayad's victims woke to Irys's probing. She had tried to enter their minds, to break through to where their self-awareness was hiding. Irys reported that their minds were like abandoned houses, fully furnished, with embers still smoking in the fireplace, but no one home. Irys and I resigned ourselves to the knowledge that the victims would live out their days unaware of their new comfortable surroundings in Brazil's guest wing. I mourned over the loss of my friend Kara. Irys had sought out the rooms used by the orphans and reported that May was still there, alive and well. I planned to visit with May as soon as Janco regained some of his strength.
"It's obvious that the children in Brazil's orphanage were kidnapped from Sitia,"
Irys explained, visiting me in the infirmary at Janco's bedside.
"Malkin's ring of child thieves spaced their abductions far enough apart to avoid detection. Magic is usually stronger in women, and that explains why there are more girls. The kidnappers targeted bloodlines where magic was present, although they took a gamble with children that young. There's no way to be sure the power will develop. Malkin and Brazil must have planned this for a long time."
Irys raked her fingers through her long brown hair.
"Finding your family shouldn't be too difficult."
I blinked at her in shock. You're joking, right?
"Why would I joke?"
She was unaware of the emotional tailspin she'd caused me. She was right. Joking wasn't her style, so I thought for a moment. Before he died, Malkin said something about the Zaltana bloodline.
"Zaltana?"
Wiping away her usual serious expression, Irys laughed. It was like the sun coming out after weeks of rain.
I think they did lose a girl. My goodness, you're in for a real surprise if you're part of the Zaltana clan. That would explain why you alone didn't cave in under Malkin's spell.
Questions hovered on my lips. I wanted to know more about this family, but I didn't want to get my hopes up. There was the possibility that I wasn't a Zaltana. I guess I would find out when I reached Cydia. Irys wanted to start my magical training right away. Uneasiness hovered in my chest whenever I thought of leaving Ixia. I changed the subject. How's the commander? Irys confessed her frustration.
He's different from the children. There's nothing in their minds, but he's retreated to a white place. If I can only find where he is, then I might be able to bring him back.
I considered this for a while, and thought back to a time in the war room when I had fallen asleep. May I try?
Why not?
I made sure Janco was comfortable and had everything he desired. Irys accompanied me to the commander's room. The bodies had been removed, and someone had attempted to clean up. I perched on the edge of the commander's bed and took his cold hand in mine. Following Irys's instructions, I closed my eyes, sending my mental awareness toward him. My feet crunched on ice. A cold wind stabbed my face and filled my lungs with tiny daggers. Dazzling white surrounded me. Diamond dust or snowflakes, it was hard to tell. I walked for a while and was immediately confused by the sparkling blizzard. Stumbling through the storm, I fought to remain calm and to remind myself that I was not lost. Whenever I took a step forward, the icy wind drove me back. I was about to admit defeat when I remembered why I had thought I could find the commander. Focusing on the scene of a young woman exulting over a slain snowcat caused the wind to stop and the blizzard to clear. I stood next to Ambrose. She was dressed in heavy white hunting furs that resembled the skin of the cat. "Come back," I said.
"I can't,"
she said, pointing into the distance. Thin black bars surrounded us on all sides. A birdcage was my first impression, but upon closer scrutiny, I could see that the bars were soldiers armed with swords.
"Every time I tried to leave, they pushed me back."
Fury flamed in her face before dying into weary. "But you're the commander."
"Not here. Here I'm just Ambrosia, trapped inside my mistake of a body. The soldiers know about my curse."
I searched my mind for a reply. The guards didn't belong to Malkin. They belonged to her. My eyes were drawn to the snowcat's carcass. "How did you kill the cat?" Her face came alive as she recounted how she had bathed in snowcat scent and spent weeks cloaked in snowcat furs, pretending to be one of the animals until they allowed her to be part of their pack. In the end, it was only a matter of time and the perfect opportunity to make the kill.
"Proof that I was really a man, that I had won the right to be a man."
"Then perhaps you need to wear your prize," I suggested. "Skins will not help you against that lot." I jerked my head at the ring of guards. Comprehension widened the woman's golden eyes. She gazed at the slain cat, then morphed into the commander. Her shoulder-length hair shortened into his buzz cut, fine lines of age growing on her face as he emerged. The white furs dropped to the ground as his wrinkle-free uniform materialized. He stepped away from the skins, kicking them dismissively. "You shouldn't do that," I said. "She's a part of you. You might need her again."
"And do I need you, Elena? Can I trust you to keep my mutation a secret?"
The commander asked with a fierce intensity. "I came here to bring you back. Isn't that answer enough?"
"Valek swore me a blood oath of loyalty when I carved my initial on his chest. Would you do the same?"
"Does Valek know about Ambrosia?" I asked.
"No. You haven't answered my question."
I showed the commander Valek's butterfly. "I wear this against my chest. I've pledged my loyalty to Valek, who is faithful to you." The commander reached for the butterfly. I stood still as he removed it from my necklace. He took a knife from the skins and sliced it across his right palm. Holding the pendant in his bloody hand, he extended the knife toward me. I held out my right hand, wincing as the knife bit into it. Our blood mixed as I shook his hand, with the butterfly wedged between our palms. When he released his grip, Valek's gift was in my hand. I returned it to its proper place over my heart.
How do we get back?
He asked. You're the commander. His eyes rested on the dead cat. Looking around at the ring of soldiers, he drew his sword.
We fight,
he said. I pulled the spear from the cat's side and wiped the blood on the snow. Feeling the weight of the weapon in my grip, I swung it around in a few practice moves. It was lighter than a bow, and a bit off balance by the metal tip, but it would work. We charged the men. The circle of guards tightened immediately around us. Back to back, the commander and I fought. The men were skilled, but the commander was a master swordsman. He had bested Valek and killed a snowcat. It was like fighting with 5 more defenders by my side. When I sunk the spear's tip into one guard's heart, he exploded into a shower of snow crystals that floated away with the wind. Time slowed as I hacked at one man after another, until finally, time snapped to the present. I whirled around, searching for an opponent, only to discover that we had dispatched all the men. Snow swirled around us.
Nice work,
the commander said.
You helped me rediscover my true self, killing off my demons.
He took my hand and pressed it to his lips. The wintry scene melted, and I found myself back on the bed, looking into the commander's powerful eyes. That night, Valek and I briefed the commander on all that had happened since the general's brandy meeting. Valek had Brazel interrogated and discovered that Brazel and Mokan had been planning a coup for the past 10 years.
Brazel told me that Mokan showed up at his manor with a group of children,
Valek said.
He was looking for a place to hide and he struck a deal with Brazel to help Brazel become the next commander. Once Mokan achieved enough power to reach your mind from MD5, they started feeding you Qdoyle, sir.
What about the factory?
The commander asked.
We have halted production,
Valek said.
Good. Salvage what equipment you can. Then burn the factory and any Qdoyle to the ground.
Yes, sir.
Anything else?
One more interesting item. Brazel said that once he and Mokan had control of Ixia, they planned to take over City.
The next day, the commander held court, with Valek standing at his right side. Brazel was brought before him to face charges. As expected, Brazel was stripped of his rank and sentenced to spend the rest of his life in the commander's dungeon. Permitted a few last words, Brazel shouted,
You fools! Your commander's a deceiver! You've been lied to for years! The commander's really a woman dressed as a man!
Silence blanketed the room, but the commander's neutral expression never faltered. Soon, laughter echoed off the stone walls. Brazel was hauled away amid cheers and jeers. Who would believe the ravings of a madman? Obviously no one. I thought about their jeers. They laughed, not because the idea of a woman in power was so ridiculous, but because Commander Ambrose had a powerful presence. His frank and abrupt dealings were so honest and forthright that the thought of him deceiving anyone was laughable. And due to his beliefs and convictions about himself, even though I knew the truth, I could not think of him in any other way. Later in the day, I went to visit the orphanage. I found May in the dormitory. This time, happy memories followed me as I walked through the rooms used by the orphans. When she saw me, May bounced off the bed and wrapped herself around me.
Yelena! I thought I would never see you again,
she gushed. I squeezed her tight. When she pulled back, I smiled to see her crooked skirt and messy ponytail. As I braided her hair, May chattered about what had happened since I had left. Her excitement faded when she talked about Kara, and it was then that I could see how much she had grown. When I finished her hair, she said,
We're going with you to Cydia.
May spun in a circle, unable to remain still. She waved toward a suitcase on the floor. What?
That lady from the south told us that she would take us home to find our families.
A brief pang clenched my heart. Family had a different meaning to me. Valek, Ari, and Janco felt like my family. And even Marin seemed like a grumpy older sister. That's wonderful, I said to May, trying to match her enthusiasm. May stopped her dance for a moment.
There are so few of us left,
she said in a sedate voice. Valek will make sure Kara and the others are taken good care of.
Valek? He's so handsome.
May laughed, and was so delightful I couldn't resist hugging her again. Janco, on the other hand, greeted me with a gloomy face when I stopped to say goodbye. Irys, anxious to head south, wanted to be on the road in the morning. Ari had taken over my role of nurse and was sitting next to Janco. Whatever happened to "Sieges weathered, fight together, friends forever?" I asked him, quoting his message on my switchblade. Janco's eyes lit up.
You little fox. Figured it out already, have you?
I smirked.
As soon as Janco's better, we're coming south.
Ari said. And what would you do there? I asked.
Work on our hands.
Janco said, smiling.
I could use a vacation.
Protect you.
Ari said. I don't need protection in the south, I said. And I seem to remember that not long ago, I bested 2 of my instructors.
She's cocky already.
Janco sighed.
We can't go with her now. She'll be swaggering and boasting and generally obnoxious. It's bad enough I have to deal with that from Ari. I could never handle 2.
Besides, I said, you'll be bored. Ari grumped and crossed his massive arms, looking sour.
First sign of trouble, you message us, and we'll be there. You got that?
Ari asked. Yes, sir, I said. Don't worry about me, Ari. I'll be fine. And I'll be back.
You'd better,
Janco said.
I want a rematch.
But I had spoken too soon about returning. Valek, Irys, and I had discussed my future, but the commander seemed to have other plans. Commander Ambrose called for a formal meeting that evening. With just Valek, Ari, and Irys in attendance in Brussels' old office, the commander agreed to honor the trade treaty, even though it had been enacted under Malkin's influence. Then he told me my fate.
Yelena,
He began in a formal tone.
you have saved my life, and for that, I thank you. But you have magical abilities that are not tolerated in Ixia. I have no choice but to sign an order for your execution.
Valek placed a warning hand on Ari's shoulder to prevent him from charging the commander. Ari stayed still, but his outrage was evident in his face. When the commander held a paper out to Valek, coldness crept along my skin, leaving behind a numb feeling of dread. Valek didn't move.
Sir, I've always believed that having a magician work for us would be beneficial and could have prevented this particular situation.
Valek said.
We can trust her.
A valid point.
The commander drew back his arm, resting it on the desk.
Even though we trust her, even though she saved my life, I must follow the code of behavior. To do otherwise would be a sign of weakness, something I can't afford right now, especially after the business with Malkin. Plus, the generals and my advisors will not trust her.
Once again, the commander extended the execution order to Valek. In my frantic mind, I heard Irys telling me to flee. She would attempt to slow Valek down. No, I told her. I would see this to the end. I would not run away.
I won't take it,
Valek said in a flat voice. He betrayed no emotion.
You would disobey a direct order?
The commander asked.
No, if I don't take the order, then I won't have to disobey it.
And if I make it a verbal order?
I will obey, but it will be my very last task for you.
Valek pulled a knife off his belt. The ring of steel sounded as Ari unsheathed his sword.
You'll have to get through me first,
he said, stepping in front of me. Ari had a better than average chance of beating Valek, but I knew he wouldn't win, and I didn't want him to try. No, Ari, I said. I pushed his sword arm down and stood next to Valek. Our eyes met. I understood that Valek's loyalty to the commander was without question. His blue eyes held a fierce determination, and I knew in my soul that Valek would take his own life after he had taken mine. The commander gazed at us with a quiet consideration. I felt time freeze under his scrutiny.
I've signed this order, per the code,
the commander finally said.
I will assign someone else to carry it out. It may take a few days for me to find a suitable person.
He looked at me and Irys, a hint that we needed to get on the road as soon as possible.
This order is valid in Ixia only. You're all dismissed.
The office emptied in a hurry. I was giddy with relief as Ari swept me into one of his bear hugs and whooped with joy. But then, my heart seized with pain as I realized that I would be parted from Valek so soon after we had joined. After Irys and Ari left to organize the escape, Valek pulled me aside. We kissed with passion and a desperate urgency. After we drew apart to catch our breaths, I said, "Come with me." It wasn't a plea or a question. It was an invitation. Valek's blue eyes closed with pain.
I can't.
I turned away, feeling like one of Valek's black statues, but he drew me back.
Elena, you need to learn, you need to find your family, you need to spread your wings and see how far you can fly. You don't need me right now, but the commander needs me.
I clung to Valek. He was right. I didn't need him, but I wanted him to be with me forever. We left that night. Irys led our ragtag group. 8 girls and 2 boys from Brazel's orphanage followed Irys through the forest toward the southern border. I took the rearguard position to make sure everyone stayed together and to make sure no one tailed our group. We hiked for a few hours until we found a suitable clearing to camp for the night. More than adequate provisions for our journey had been provided by Ari. I smiled, remembering his lecture to me about staying out of trouble. Just like an overprotective brother, he wasn't content until I promised to send him a message if I needed help. I would miss him and Janco dearly. We set up 6 small tents in a circle. Irys amazed the children as she set fire to the kindling with a magical flourish. After everyone had gone to sleep, I sat by the fire, stirring the dying embers. Unwilling to join May in our tent, I gazed at the single flame that erupted when I poked at the fire. It danced by itself for an audience of 1. I wondered for the 100th time why Valek hadn't come to say goodbye, fingering my pendant. I sensed movement. Jumping up, I drew my bow. A shadow detached from a tree. Irys had created a magical barrier around our tents. According to her, the barrier would deflect a person's vision, so all he would see was an empty clearing. The shadow stopped at the edge, unaffected by the magic, and smiled at me. Valek. He held out a hand. I grasped his cold fingers with both hands as he led me away from the tents and deeper into the forest. "Why didn't you come before we left?" I asked him when we stopped at the base of a tree. The roots of the massive oak had broken through the ground, creating small protective hollows.
I was busy making sure the commander would have a hard time locating someone to carry out his orders.
Valek grinned with vicious delight.
It's amazing how much work there is cleaning up after Brazel.
I thought about what that cleanup would entail. "Who's tasting the commander's food?" I asked.
For now, I am, but I believe Captain Star would make an excellent candidate. Since she knows who all the essences are, I think her help will be invaluable.
It was my turn to smile. Star would do well if she passed the training. If.
Enough talk.
Valek said, guiding me down between the roots.
I need to give you a proper send-off.
My last night in Ixia was spent with Valek beneath the tree. The hours till dawn flew by. The rising sun intruded, waking me from a contented doze in Valek's arms, forcing me to face the day that I had to leave him. Sensing my mood, Valek said,
An execution order hasn't kept us apart before. There are ways to get around it. We will be together.
Is that an order?
No, a promise.